Phyllis Diller spent decades making America roar with laughter. Her cackling punchlines, the outrageous wigs, and the endless jokes about her imaginary lazy husband, Fang, became part of television history. Audiences loved the madcap energy she carried into every performance. But behind the laughter was a reality her fans could never have guessed. For more than 30 years, nearly every single week, Phyllis drove quietly to the same place. It wasn't a Hollywood studio or a glamorous party. It was a private facility known only to her closest family. Within those walls lived someone she loved more deeply than anyone else, someone whose medical condition was never a part of her comedy act. Phyllis kept that chapter of her life hidden, guarding it like a sacred trust. The visits stopped suddenly in 1993, and with that silence came a heartbreak so deep it followed her to the end of her life. People who saw her on stage assumed her relentless touring schedule was fueled by ambition or money. But the truth was far more complicated. She kept working because the laughter was both shield and medicine, a way to keep her heart from shattering under the weight of her private sorrow. Her audiences saw the bright costumes and the perfectly timed punchlines. They didn't see the woman who left the stage, changed out of the horsehair wig, and quietly wept on the drive to a hidden destination. This dual life, one public, one achingly private, explains the almost superhuman dedication Phyllis showed to her craft. To understand why she performed even after her heart literally stopped beating and was restarted by doctors, you have to go back to the very beginning. A childhood where death was common, laughter was a survival skill, and a quick wit became her most powerful weapon. Phyllis Ada Driver, who would later electrify audiences as Phyllis Diller, entered the world on July 17, 1917, in the quiet Midwest town of Lima, Ohio. Her arrival was remarkable not only because she would become a comedy legend, but because her parents were far older than most new parents of that era. Her father, Perry Marcus Driver, was 55. Her mother, Frances Ada Ramsey, was 36. That age gap meant that from her first days, Phyllis lived in a household where the air carried the weight of maturity and mortality. Many of her earliest memories involved funerals and the stoic company of older relatives. Rather than scaring her, these experiences fascinated her. While other children shied away from conversations about death, Phyllis listened with curiosity, developing a comfort with dark topics that would later give her comedy its daring edge. Her family practiced Methodism and traced its roots to German-Irish ancestry, but even as a child, she quietly stepped away from religious belief. Her independent streak appeared early. She asked questions others avoided and refused to accept easy answers. Life at home was both stable and lonely. The Driver household was quiet, their routines simple. That silence forced Phyllis inward, where she entertained herself by inventing stories. She narrated imaginary adventures to invisible audiences, unwittingly rehearsing for a future she couldn't yet imagine. Friends later recalled that she could make an ordinary walk to school feel like a theatrical event. Her sharp observations about neighbors and classmates foreshadowed the cutting humor she would bring to her stand-up acts decades later. At Central High School in Lima, Phyllis began experimenting with humor as a social tool. She wasn't the class clown in the traditional sense. Instead, she wielded comedy like a scalpel, precise, unexpected, and perfectly timed. In the hallways and on the school steps, she delivered offhand remarks that sent her friends into fits of laughter. These informal performances built her confidence and hinted that her voice carried something special. But the wider world was far less forgiving. The Great Depression hit when Phyllis was still a teenager, gutting her family's finances. She took to selling newspapers on street corners to help keep food on the table, developing a grit that would carry her through many lean years. Somewhere during her adolescence, she also learned that her family's original surname had been Triber, a small revelation that underscored how identities can shift across generations. That quiet fact, names can change, people can reinvent themselves, would resonate later when she crafted the flamboyant persona of Phyllis Diller. From an early age, music captivated her. At just 10 years old, Phyllis won acceptance to the prestigious Sherwood Music Conservatory in Chicago. It was an extraordinary achievement for a child from a modest Ohio household. She excelled at the piano. her fingers dancing across the keys with a maturity beyond her years. By 1939, she was skilled enough to perform professionally with orchestras, a dream come true for many aspiring musicians, yet perfection haunted her. Despite her talent, she constantly compared herself to her teachers and believed she could never match their brilliance. After 3 intense years, and with the Great Depression straining her family's resources, she made the painful decision to leave Sherwood. It wasn't failure that drove her out. It was a quiet intuition that music, while beloved, was not her ultimate calling. She tried college again in 1935, enrolling at Bluffton to study music education. But by 1937, she left once more, this time because she married, though she would sometimes look back with regret. That decision cleared the path toward a different destiny. In 1937, Phyllis married Sherwood Diller, a man whose easy charm initially promised stability. The young couple moved to Ypsilanti, Michigan, where Sherwood found work in a bomber plant. By September 27, 1940, they welcomed their first child, Peter. But the nation was deep in wartime rationing, and their combined income barely reached $25 a week. The stress of scarcity collided with the challenges of new motherhood, plunging Phyllis into postpartum depression, a condition few people spoke about openly at the time. Between 1940 and 1945, the couple moved at least 8 times, chasing employment and cheaper rent. Eventually, they settled in California, where Sherwood found a position at the Alameda Naval Air Station. Even then, money was tight, and it was Phyllis who kept the household afloat. Her second child, Sally, arrived in 1944. To help make ends meet, Phyllis took a job as a newspaper editor, sharpening her skills with words and timing, tools that would become weapons on the comedy stage. Heartbreak struck in 1945 when Phyllis gave birth to a son who survived only 2 weeks. Records differ on whether the baby was named Perry or remained unnamed, but the loss devastated her. Doctors blamed prematurity and the limited neonatal care of the era. Sherwood had just lost his job, adding financial anxiety to emotional grief. Phyllis, only 28, carried the pain quietly and soon suffered a miscarriage as well. Over the next decade, she endured 6 pregnancies. 5 children survived. The deaths left invisible scars that no audience ever saw. Writing small newspaper pieces for $2 each became both an income source and a form of therapy. Between 1946 and 1950, Phyllis gave birth to Suzanne, Stephanie, and a son also named Perry, bringing the number of living children to 5. But their financial situation barely improved. Sherwood often refused jobs he considered beneath him and squandered a $10,000 inheritance that might have stabilized the family. They lived on food stamps and sometimes relied on powdered milk to feed the children. Phyllis stretched every penny, earning just $15 to $20 a week by writing for small local papers. Despite the crushing workload of caring for 5 young children, she never lost her sharp wit. Friends noticed that even in her most exhausted moments, she could turn frustration into a quick joke. What seemed like casual humor was actually a lifeline. Each wisecrack was a way to keep despair at bay, to transform hardship into something survivable. By 1952, their situation grew desperate enough that the family was evicted for $300 in unpaid rent. Yet that same year, Phyllis caught a break, landing a steady job as a radio copywriter at Crow in Oakland with a paycheck of $75 a week, more money than she had ever earned. She soon created a 15-minute on-air segment titled Phyllis Diller's The Homely Friend Maker, in which she poked fun at housewife tips and suburban life. The silly name gave her a platform and a taste of performance. Sherwood, who had long encouraged her to share her humor with an audience, pushed her to perform live. Her first real show took place at a veterans hospital. It was a disaster. Patients heckled her while she attempted to accompany herself on piano. But instead of quitting, she treated the failure as fuel. Everything changed on March 7, 1955. At 37 years old, Phyllis took the stage at San Francisco's Purple Onion nightclub. This time, the audience erupted with laughter. Unlike other female performers who aimed for glamour, she leaned into self-deprecation, joking about her looks, her cooking, and the chaos of motherhood. She famously quipped that her food could kill you, What began as a short engagement stretched into an astonishing 89-week run, nearly 2 full years. The club earned over $100,000 from her shows, while she took home a modest $100 a week. Television soon came calling. Within a year, she was appearing on national programs, her timing sharp and her material fearlessly personal. She credited her confidence to a book she had read, The Magic of Believing, which convinced her that success required boldness. After 15 years of homemaking and heartbreak, she had finally found a career that belonged entirely to her. By 1956, Phyllis Diller had transformed herself into an unforgettable stage presence. Instead of chasing traditional beauty, she exaggerated every feature. She donned a wild horsehair wig, slathered on clownish makeup, and carried a long ivory cigarette holder, even though she barely smoked. Her dresses clashed in loud colors and impossible patterns. Audiences loved the absurdity. The strategy was deliberate. Nearly 40, she knew she had to stand out in a comedy scene dominated by men. Her bookings skyrocketed by 40% almost overnight. Soon she was a regular guest on popular television variety shows, holding her own beside established stars. Her wig collection eventually topped 50 pieces, each one costing between $50 and $100. The 12-inch cigarette holder became an emblem, a physical punchline that completed the character she had carefully constructed. Through it all, she kept the public laughing while privately navigating the slow disintegration of her marriage. Even as fame and fortune finally arrived, Phyllis could not escape the turbulence at home. Her relationship with Sherwood deteriorated under the strain of years of financial instability and his chronic unemployment. Yet she rarely spoke ill of him on stage. Instead, she created Fang, the fictional lazy husband who became a beloved running joke. Behind the caricature was real disappointment and loneliness, but she chose to mask personal anguish with humor. This decision mirrored the larger secret of her life. Those weekly visits to a private facility where a loved one faced a long-term condition she never publicly revealed. Audiences knew only the loud costumes and the roaring laughter. Few suspected the depth of the grief she carried or the discipline it took to keep performing night after night. Phyllis Diller's career was not merely entertainment, it was resilience incarnate. The art of turning sorrow into something that could make the whole world laugh. By the early 1960s, Phyllis was a fixture on American television. She traded barbs with Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show and became a regular on The Ed Sullivan Show, charming millions with her razor-sharp wit. Unlike many comedians of the era, she wrote much of her own material, ensuring that every joke bore her distinct voice. She also began recording comedy albums, proving that her humor could leap from stage to vinyl without losing its spark. Each appearance expanded her audience and solidified her place as one of the few female stand-ups commanding primetime attention. Comedy in the 1950s and 60s was overwhelmingly male. Phyllis carved a path where few women dared to walk. She often performed in clubs that had never booked a solo female comic. Industry insiders initially doubted she could draw crowds on her own, but she consistently sold out rooms. Younger comedians, especially women, later credited her as the performer who made their own careers possible. Her success quietly shifted the perception of what women could do in comedy, proving that a woman's life, with all its domestic chaos and unglamorous truths, could be the stuff of brilliant stand-up. Beyond the stage, Hollywood soon came calling. Phyllis appeared in feature films such as Boy, Did I Get a Wrong Number? 1966, and 8 on the Lam, 1967, bringing her trademark energy to the big screen. Her instantly recognizable voice also found a second life in animation, where she lent it to cartoons and, later, beloved children's projects like A Bug's Life, 1998. Whether on screen or behind a microphone, her comedic rhythm translated effortlessly. After finally divorcing Sherwood in 1965, Phyllis embraced a period of self-reinvention. She openly discussed cosmetic surgeries at a time when such admissions were rare, joking about them on stage and turning potential gossip into punchlines. She later shared a long companionship with lawyer Robert Hastings, describing their bond as one of the great joys of her life. Her willingness to speak candidly about aging, beauty standards, and love kept her relatable even as decades passed. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, accolades poured in. She received an American Comedy Award for Lifetime Achievement and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. More important than trophies was the respect of her peers. Comedians from Joan Rivers to Ellen DeGeneres cited her as a trailblazer who proved that women could headline comedy clubs and television specials with unflinching honesty. Phyllis continued performing into her 90s, defying expectations with her vitality. Even after experiencing heart problems and undergoing surgeries, she returned to the stage, convinced that laughter itself was a form of medicine. She passed away peacefully on August 20, 2012, at the age of 95. By then, she had not only entertained millions but also transformed stand-up comedy, leaving behind a blueprint for future generations of performers. Her fearless embrace of self-mockery, combined with an unspoken reservoir of strength, remains her enduring legacy. Phyllis wasn't only a performer, she was a sharp writer. Over the years, she published memoirs and humorous advice books that revealed the clever mind behind the cackle. Titles like a Lampshade in a Whorehouse" mixed personal stories with razor wit, proving that her comedic voice worked just as well on the page as on stage. Through these writings, she documented the highs and lows of a life that constantly balanced public laughter with private reflection. The ripple effect of Phyllis's career can be traced through countless comedians who followed her path. Joan Rivers, Roseanne Barr, Margaret Cho, and many others openly credited her for opening doors. She demonstrated that a woman could headline clubs, sell out theaters, and talk frankly about marriage, motherhood, and aging, all while staying uniquely herself. Today, when young comedians confidently own their point of view, they're walking a trail Phyllis cleared decades earlier. Her wigs, clashing dresses, and cigarette holder were more than props. They were a carefully crafted form of branding. Fashion historians now examine her stage wardrobe as an early example of using costume to build a personal brand. Long before social media, Phyllis understood the power of a signature look that audiences would remember instantly. Though known for her loud laugh, Phyllis often gave quietly. She supported arts education, donated to children's hospitals, and funded scholarships for young musicians, perhaps remembering her own early love of piano. Many of these contributions stayed out of the headlines, but friends and beneficiaries later shared stories of her generosity. Even after her death in 2012, Phyllis remained a pop culture reference. Clips of her Purple Onion performances circulate online, inspiring new fans. Comedy festivals hold tribute nights in her honor, and documentaries about the history of stand-up almost always feature her groundbreaking routines. In the digital age, her laugh continues to echo. Perhaps the greatest takeaway from Phyllis Diller's journey is resilience. She faced poverty, personal loss, a difficult marriage, and relentless industry skepticism. Yet she transformed those struggles into humor. Her story reminds performers and audiences alike that comedy can be both a shield and a source of healing. Phyllis approached comedy like a science experiment. She kept notebooks filled with timing cues, word choices, and crowd reactions. Friends recall her rehearsing a single joke dozens of times to shave off one unnecessary syllable. This meticulous craftwork proved that her success wasn't luck. It was discipline mixed with instinct. Behind the curtain, she forged deep bonds with fellow entertainers like Bob Hope and Johnny Carson. She toured with Hope on USO trips, entertaining troops overseas, and sparred playfully with Carson in legendary Tonight Show appearances. These relationships offered camaraderie in a business that often felt isolating. Phyllis flipped 1950s expectations upside down. At a time when women were expected to keep perfect homes, she built a career out of joking that her house was a disaster. Instead of being judged, she was cheered for her honesty, showing audiences, especially women, that imperfection could be liberating. Her albums, recorded in packed clubs, captured the electricity of her live shows. Titles like Are You Ready for Phyllis Diller? Preserved her quick wit for future generations and sold impressively for comedy records of the era, proving her reach extended far beyond television. Writers and producers of early sitcoms often cited her style, rapid-fire jokes, exaggerated domestic chaos, as a blueprint. Series from I Love Lucy to later family comedies borrowed her blend of physical humor and sharp one-liners, even when she wasn't on the screen. Phyllis toured internationally, performing in Europe, Asia, and Australia. Audiences who didn't share her cultural background still roared with laughter, proof that her humor was universal. She often remarked that a good joke could cross any border. Rather than hide from aging, Phyllis made it part of her act. She joked openly about plastic surgery, hair dye, and wrinkles, taking control of a topic that Hollywood often used to sideline women. By laughing first, she disarmed critics and gave other performers permission to age on their own terms. Today, universities that teach comedy writing frequently analyze her sets for timing and structure. Scholars point to her fearless self-mockery and precise pacing as textbook examples of stand-up mastery, ensuring her work remains a living classroom for students of the craft. As her reputation solidified, Phyllis quietly mentored younger comics, especially women, offering tips on timing, crowd work, and how to survive the male-dominated club circuit. Many later credited her guidance for their early breakthroughs. Her countless guest spots on The Tonight Show and other talk programs turned her into a fixture of late-night television. Audiences never knew whether she'd bring a new outrageous wig, a razor-sharp one-liner, or a spontaneous piano riff. From quirky grandmothers to eccentric neighbors, she lent her unmistakable voice to animated films and TV specials, proving that her comedic energy could thrive without a live audience in front of her. Following her separation from Sherwood, she embraced independence with the same gusto she brought to the stage, managing finances, raising children, and reshaping her personal life while keeping her career at full throttle. Her humor leapt off the stage and onto the page with best-selling books that mixed autobiography and comedic essays. They revealed her private reflections and inspired countless readers to see everyday struggles as punchlines. Phyllis gave time and money to causes ranging from children's hospitals to arts education. She believed laughter could heal, and her charitable efforts showed that her generosity was as large as her laugh. From comedy club tributes to national arts awards, she collected a shelf full of recognitions. Each honor validated the trail she blazed for female performers who followed. Even in her late 80s, she delivered sharp sets and filled theaters. Her farewell appearances were celebrations of a career that never lost its spark. Modern comedians, from stand-up stars to late-night hosts, cite Phyllis as a pioneer whose fearless self-mockery opened doors. Her influence echoes in the pacing, structure, and wit of today's best acts. After her passing in 2012, tributes poured in from fans, fellow comedians, and major media outlets. Memorial events and retrospectives continue to celebrate her groundbreaking life. Phyllis constantly refreshed her act to stay relevant. From updating punchlines to experimenting with new characters and costumes, she never let audiences feel she was stuck in the past. This adaptability kept her bookings strong for decades. While she thrived on stage, her private life was quieter. She loved gardening, painting, and cooking elaborate meals for family and close friends. These hobbies balanced the high energy of her public persona and revealed a gentler side of her personality. After her divorce, Phyllis enjoyed later-life romances, but valued independence more than marriage. She spoke candidly in interviews about choosing companionship on her own terms, a progressive stance for her era. Her outlandish wigs, clashing outfits, and famously long cigarette holder were more than gimmicks. They were comedic tools. She used fashion to exaggerate her self-deprecating jokes and to make a visual impact before she even spoke a word. Beyond performing, Phyllis was a savvy negotiator. She managed her bookings, handled contracts, and invested wisely. Few realized how carefully she built a financial foundation that allowed her creative freedom. She broke open doors for female stand-ups, talk show hosts, and comedic actresses. Modern comics like Joan Rivers and Ellen DeGeneres have acknowledged the path she paved for women to headline clubs and television specials. From guest appearances on hit sitcoms to her own variety specials, she became a familiar face in American living rooms. Each role showcased her quick wit and impeccable timing. Her albums and humorous memoirs kept her voice in circulation even when she wasn't touring. These releases brought her comedy to people who never saw her live and cemented her reputation as a multi-platform entertainer. Phyllis performed tirelessly for U.S. service members, joining USO tours around the world. These shows deepened her sense of purpose and created a lifelong bond with military audiences. Even in her 90s, she painted daily, wrote new material, and appeared at comedy festivals. Her commitment to creativity proved that age could never dull her passion for the arts. Today, comedy schools and festivals celebrate her groundbreaking career. Documentaries, retrospectives, and scholarly studies analyze her routines as examples of perfect comedic structure, ensuring her influence continues. Long before content creation was a buzzword, Phyllis carefully stored scripts, notes, and recordings of her sets. Today, these archives, donated to museums and universities, give fans and researchers a window into her creative process. Comedians often called her a human metronome. She studied audience reactions with scientific precision, adjusting pause lengths or punchline placement until every beat landed perfectly. This discipline made her routines timeless. From 1950s clubgoers to 2000s college students discovering her on late-night reruns, Phyllis captivated multiple generations. Families often bonded over watching her, proving that great comedy never ages. Her stand-up specials aired in Europe, Asia, and Australia, inspiring comics in countries where women rarely headlined. Many international performers credit her with showing that self-deprecating humor can bridge cultures. In later life, she painted vibrant canvases, abstracts filled with wild color and motion. Galleries hosted exhibits of her work, revealing yet another creative outlet beyond comedy. Phyllis frequently addressed college students and women's groups, sharing lessons on perseverance, reinvention, and finding humor in hardship. Her talks blended laugh-out-loud moments with heartfelt advice. She had eclectic collections, rare wigs, antique furniture, and even unusual musical instruments. Each item told a story, and she loved entertaining guests with the history behind her treasures. After her passing, tributes poured in from legends like Carol Burnett, Lily Tomlin, and Jay Leno, all emphasizing how her bravery and originality shaped modern comedy. Current stars such as Tina Fey, Amy Schumer, and Ali Wong often cite Phyllis as a blueprint for turning personal chaos into universal laughter. Her signature style, making herself the punchline, remains a powerful comedic tool. Workshops and writing guides still analyze her routines as master classes in balancing vulnerability with confidence. In 2017, the 100th anniversary of her birth inspired festivals, museum exhibits, and TV marathons, ensuring that new audiences discovered the woman behind the iconic cackle. During the 1970s and 80s, Phyllis became a surprise favorite at universities. Young audiences, many who'd grown up hearing her on TV, packed auditoriums to see how a veteran comic could still out-riff the newest acts. While her jokes often targeted herself, she also slipped in sharp observations about changing American culture, suburban life, gender roles, and consumer fads. Scholars now view her as a bridge between vaudeville-style gags and modern observational comedy. Though she performed solo, Phyllis loved the camaraderie of writers' rooms for TV specials. She swapped punchlines with young up-and-coming writers, sometimes giving them their first professional credit. Beyond cameos, she occasionally tried larger movie roles, both comedic and dramatic, proving she could adapt her timing to the slower rhythm of film and reach audiences who rarely attended live stand-up. Phyllis turned everyday struggles, burnt dinners, messy houses, endless chores into laugh-out-loud moments. Feminist historians now highlight how her humor validated the real lives of millions of women. Fans often said attending her show felt like visiting a close friend. She greeted people in the lobby after sets, remembering names and personal details, creating lifelong connections far beyond the stage. Her image and voice have popped up in songs, album art, and pop culture collages, a testament to how deeply she embedded herself in the American imagination. Museums and libraries continue to digitize her handwritten notes, TV appearances, and costume sketches. ensuring future generations can study the evolution of her craft. Late in life, she often spoke about comedy as a form of resilience, a way to face grief, aging, and uncertainty. These reflections remain inspiring to artists and everyday fans alike. Podcasters, YouTubers, and TikTok comedians cite her fearless experimentation, with persona and presentation as a blueprint for building an audience in today's digital landscape. Several of her children and grandchildren pursued creative careers, writing, music, or art, crediting the household's constant humor and curiosity as their greatest inheritance. Certain one-liners have entered everyday speech. Comedy historians track how her best bits still circulate, sometimes unattributed in modern memes and stand-up sets. Even into her late 80s, Phyllis drew packed houses and standing ovations. Crowds spanned 3 generations, a rare feat that proved her humor never went out of style. She connected grandparents, parents, and grandchildren through shared laughter. Families often watched her specials together, turning her routines into multi-generational memories. Several filmmakers created documentaries exploring her life and craft, using rare backstage footage and interviews to showcase how she changed the face of comedy. Industry peers, from club owners to headline comics, established awards and scholarships in her name, ensuring upcoming comedians remember her trailblazing career. Her quick wit and wild costumes influenced the format of variety shows well beyond her own appearances, inspiring producers to feature more improvisation and bold visuals. Phyllis openly shared stories of personal loss and health scares, framing them with humor to encourage audiences to face hardships with courage and a smile. Lima, Ohio now proudly honors its famous daughter with plaques, annual events, and museum exhibits, giving locals and tourists a glimpse into her early years. Major museums curate traveling exhibits of her wigs, costumes, and handwritten joke cards, allowing fans worldwide to experience the artistry behind her stage persona. Comedy writers cite her punchline structure and rapid-fire pacing as a blueprint for contemporary sitcom dialogue and character-driven humor. Her image still pops up in memes, late-night monologues, and nostalgic TV marathons, showing how her comedic spirit remains a living part of entertainment. Collections of her funniest and wisest sayings circulate online and in print, motivating readers to embrace self-confidence and laughter no matter their circumstances. From small comedy clubs to massive arenas overseas, echoes of her distinctive cackle continue to inspire performers and delight audiences across the world. Comedy specials on streaming platforms often mirror the structure she perfected: quick setups, self-aware asides, and a conversational rhythm that keeps viewers hooked. Writers and producers still reference her tapes when planning pacing. Late in life, Phyllis occasionally led small workshops for young performers, dissecting joke construction and stage presence. Attendees recall her sharp feedback and generous encouragement. Her outrageous wardrobe and fearless persona turned her into a symbol of self-expression, inspiring fashion designers and performance artists who value standing out as she did. University courses on comedy history and gender studies continue to feature her routines as case studies in timing, persona creation, and breaking social norms. Curators carefully maintain her wigs, costume sketches, and handwritten joke cards in climate-controlled archives, treating them as important pieces of American cultural history. Novelists and fellow entertainers often include references to Phyllis in their own books, celebrating her as a pioneer whose courage made their careers possible. Female comedians across Europe, Asia, and Latin America have cited her as a trailblazer, adapting her brand of self-deprecating humor to their own languages and cultures. Classic TV networks and streaming services regularly re-air her specials and talk show appearances, introducing her to audiences who weren't alive during her prime. Artists continue to incorporate her likeness and voice into gallery installations and stage performances, using her as a muse for pieces about humor and identity. In interviews and personal writings,